This is a reading from An Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales. Chapter 24. Society and Solitude. To seek society and to shun it are like blamable extremes for those who are living in the world, and it is to such that I am speaking. By shunning it, we indicate disdain and contempt for our neighbor, and by seeking it, we imply idleness and inactivity. We should love our neighbor as ourself, and it is not a proof of love to shun him, whilst as a sign that we love ourselves, we should be content with our own society, that is, to be alone. First think of thyself, and then of others, says St. Bernard. If then you are not called upon to receive or enter society, remain by yourself and hold converse with your own heart. But if you are rightly called on to join in society, then go as in God's sight, and mix with a free and loving heart amongst your fellows. That is bad society which has a bad object in view, or which is composed of evil livers. From indiscreet or profligate persons turn away, as the bee turns from all that is foul and impure. For just as the society of one that has been bitten by a mad dog is dangerous, especially to children and weak people, so is that of ill-regulated and profligate men, especially to those whose piety is as yet tender and weak. Some kinds of society have no end except recreation from more serious occupation. And though we should not exceed in such, still we may lawfully bestow our leisure therein. Another kind we owe to courtesy, such as mutual visits and meeting together out of respect to our neighbors. And with regard to these, we should neither be punctilious in their observance nor discourteous in their neglect, but unobtrusively fulfill our part, so as at once to avoid incivility and distraction. And lastly, as to the society of virtuous and pious persons, the oftener you seek such, the better. The vine that is planted amidst olive trees bears the richest fruit, and the soul that is constantly associated with holy people must imbibe their good qualities. Drones cannot make honey, but the bees make them work. It is a great advantage to associate with the truly devout. At all times, let simplicity, candor, gentleness, and modesty prevail in your conversation. There are some persons who weary everyone by the affectation of all their looks and actions, and as all the world would be annoyed by a man who would never walk without counting his steps or speak without singing, so society is extremely troubled by those whose deportment is always artificial and all their proceedings measured, for there is always a certain degree of presumption in such people. As a general rule, we should preserve a quiet cheerfulness of manner. St. Romuald and St. Anthony have been much praised because throughout all their austerities, their manner and countenance were always cheerful, pleasing, courteous. Rejoice with them that rejoice. And again I would say with the apostle, rejoice in the Lord always. Again I say, rejoice. Let your modesty be known to all men. Phil, chapter 4, verse 4. In order to rejoice in the Lord, the cause of your joy must not only be lawful, but good. For there are some lawful things which yet are not fitting, and that your moderation may be known, avoid presumption, which is always reprehensible. Nothing can be more contemptible than practical jokes or jests, which annoy and give pain to others. I have before shown how you may retire into solitude within yourself, even in the largest society. And besides this, you should seek some solitary place, not in the desert like St. Mary of Egypt, St. Paul, St. Anthony, Arsenius, and the other solitary fathers, but retiring into your own room, or your garden, or wherever you can. There gather together your mind and heart, and refresh your soul with pious meditation and holy thoughts, or by sacred study, imitating the Bishop of Nazanzian, who, speaking of himself, says, I was walking with myself at sunset by the seashore, for thus I am accustomed to seek relaxation and relief from my ordinary cares. And then he goes on to narrate his pious reflections, which I repeated to you before. And St. Augustine records of St. Ambrose that entering into his apartment, for the entrance was open to all, he found him reading, and having waited some time for fear of disturbing him, he went away in silence, thinking that the brief space which that holy pastor could devote to refreshing and invigorating his mind amidst the many cares and occupations ought not to be intruded upon. Chapter 25. Propriety in Dress. St. Paul desires Christian women, and he undoubtedly includes men, to adorn themselves in decent apparel, with modesty and sobriety. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 9. Now, propriety in dress and its appearances consist in material, fashion, and cleanliness. As to the latter, it should be invariable, and as far as possible you should avoid all dirt or untidiness. Outward purity is, as it were, a type of that which is within, and God himself especially required personal cleanliness of those who ministered at his altars, and took the chief part in devotion. As to the material and fashion of clothes, propriety in these respects depends upon various circumstances, such as time, age, rank, those with whom you associate, and it varies with different occasions. Most people dress better on festival days according to the season, and in penitential seasons such as Lent, just the reverse. So, at a wedding, we wear marriage garments, and at a funeral the garb of mourning. And when going into the presence of princes, we dress differently from what we do at home. The wife may adorn herself to please her husband, and it is lawful for maidens to desire to be pleasing in the eyes of their friends. But everyone despises old age, when it would affect to adorn itself. Such trifling can be tolerated only in youth. Study to be neat, and let nothing about you be slovenly or disorderly. It is an affront to those with whom you associate to be unsuitably dressed, but avoid all conceits, vanities, finery, and affectation. Adhere as far as possible to modesty and simplicity, which, doubtless, are the best ornaments of beauty, and the best atonement for its deficiency. St. Peter admonishes women not to adorn themselves with plaiting the hair and putting on of apparel. 1 St. Peter chapter 3, verse 3. And such follies in men are altogether disgusting. We are apt to suppose that vain women are but weak in virtue. At any rate, it is smothered in their ornaments and finery. They excuse themselves, saying that they see no harm. But I say, as I have said before, that the devil rejoices in such things. I would have my spiritual children always suitably attired, but without show or affectation. Theirs should be the incorruptible ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 4. St. Louis summed up all in saying that everyone should dress according to his station, so that wise men may not say, "You are too fine," nor the young, "You are too homely." But if the latter are not content with what is suitable, you must adhere to the counsel of the wise. Chapter 26. Conversation, and first of conversation concerning God. Physicians are wont to judge of a man's state of health by examining his tongue, and our words are a faithful index to the state of our soul. The Savior himself has said, "By thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned." St. Matthew chapter 12, verse 37. Our hand is quickly raised to the spot where we are wounded, and our tongue turns as quickly to the subject we delight in. If then you have a hearty love of God, you will frequently speak of him with your family, your friends, and neighbors. For the mouth of the just shall meditate wisdom, and his tongue shall speak of judgment. Psalm 36, verse 30. The bee produces nothing but honey from its little proboscis, and your tongue will always be sweetened by his name, and will know no greater joy than to overflow with his praise and benediction. Thus it is told of St. Francis that when he spoke the holy name of the Lord, his mouth seemed to be filled with the sweetest of delicacies. But when you speak of God, remember of who it is you speak, and let it be with reverence and devotion, not pompously or as it were preaching, but with the spirit of gentleness, charity, and humility. And as far as you can, let your lips drop as the honeycomb. Canticles chapter 4, verse 11. With the fragrance of devotion and heavenly things, now into the ear of one, now another, silently beseeching God to grant that this heavenly dew may reach the hearts of those who hearken. But this holy work must be done softly and meekly, not as a matter of teaching, but naturally, for it is wonderful how gentleness and a prepossessing manner tend to attract and win the hearts of men. Never, then, talk of God or of holy things as a mere formal matter of conversation, but always with devotion and thought, avoiding a peculiar vanity which we find in some professors of religion, who at all times and seasons introduce sacred and fervent expressions as a matter of course, and without thought, and then imagine that they themselves are what their words would indicate, which is far from being the case. Chapter 27. Modesty in conversation and becoming reverence. St. James says, "If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man. He is able also with a bridle to lead about the whole body." St. James chapter 3, verse 2. Beware of ever using any impure expression, for even if you had no bad intention, those who hear you may receive them differently. Impure words fall on a weak heart like oil on cloth, spreading all around. It may fill it with evil thoughts and defile it. As bodily poison enters in by the mouth, so that of the heart enters by the ear, and the tongue that utters it is a murderer, even if the venom does not take effect, owing to the heart being furnished with an antidote. Still, the malice of the tongue is the same. Neither let anyone give as an excuse that he spoke without thought, for our blessed Lord, who seeth all thoughts, has said, "Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh." Even if we intended no harm, the evil one did, and he is sure to use our lawless words as a weapon against the heart of someone. It is said that they who eat the plant called angelica always have a sweet, pleasant breath, and those whose hearts are full of modesty and purity, which is heavenly virtue, are always pure, modest, and courteous in their language. As to unholy, indecent things, the apostle will not so much as have them named among us, telling us that evil communications corrupt good manners. If unholy words are used secretly and with deliberate intention, they are infinitely more poisonous. For just as in proportion to its sharpness and point a dart enters easily into the body, so the more pointed a bad word, the further it penetrates the heart. Those who fancy that it is clever to introduce such things in society do not know its aim, which should be like that of a hive of bees, gathered together to make honey, that is, for pleasant and virtuous intercourse, and not like a nest of wasps, which will feed upon anything, however unclean. If any foolish person speaks to you in unbecoming language, show that your ears are offended, either by turning away from him, or by whatever means may be the most discreet at the time. A spirit of mockery is one of the worst imperfections of the mind, and displeases God greatly, so that he has often punished it most severely. Nothing is more hurtful to charity, and still more to devotion, than contempt and derision of our neighbor, and such is inevitably found in mockery. For this reason it has been said that mockery is the greatest insult a man can offer his neighbor, inasmuch as in other offenses he does not altogether cease to respect the person whom he offends, but in this he despises and contemns him. But as to a play upon words one with another, in all modesty and good humor, such as the Greeks called eutrapelia, there is no harm in it, but it affords an innocent way of deriving amusement from our trifling vexations and disturbances. Only we must be aware that such trifling does not degenerate into mockery. The latter causes laughter at the expense of our neighbor, but this fun and merriment arise only from modest freedom and ease.